Hello. Today is Sunday, May the 14th, 2017. Happy Mother's Day. I have a lot to talk about today, but it is the thread that has run through a number of my episodes. This is the Beverly Copeland Report. I'm Beverly Copeland. Again, today is Sunday, May the 14th, 2017. You're listening to the Beverly Copeland Report. I have a lot to talk about, but it's a continuation of the thread that's been running through my work since the onset of the neocon paradigm. The first real neocon war was the Iraq War, initiated by President George W. Bush. But the thread is going to be that the neocon paradigm has been more instrumental in the fall of the American Empire, and by extension in the fall of Anglo-Saxon Western capitalism. It has been more instrumental, been a bigger factor in that process than anything else, period. The neocon paradigm, in my opinion, therefore reduces to treason because it has wreaked havoc on Anglo-Saxon Western capitalism. For the first time in human history, the people who have controlled the Eurocentric world are being displaced. They started out, they were really forced out of Africa, weaker tribes forced out of Africa. They settled initially in Mesopotamia and the Fertile Crescent. Then they migrated west and north in Europe. Greece, Rome, and then north and west, and they have morphed into today these ruling tribes, what we call the Anglo-Saxons. Not all Anglo-Saxons are part of the ruling, quote, powers that be, if you will, but there are probably 7 or 8 of them. The English, the Irish, the Welsh, the Scotch, the Dutch, the German, the Swede, and the French. There are 8 ruling tribes who de facto really own this world. Again, they are the English, the Irish, the Welsh, the Scotch, the Dutch, the German, the Swede, and the French. 6 of them are Anglo-Saxon Protestant, 2 are Anglo-Saxon Catholic. But in the grand scheme of things, everyone else is like me, is like black people. There are no, in terms of the ruling class, the people who really de facto rule and own this world, there are 8 ruling tribes. The rest are just like black people. They're not part of the ruling oligopoly. So, for the first time, and these are the same Africans who were forced out of Africa for whatever reason, and who initially settled in the Fertile Crescent in Mesopotamia. That's why it was unconscionable for for President Bush and Obama to allow the looting of those artifacts and those treasures in Iraq and Syria, etc., through these wars. It's unconscionable because that is really where the history of the Eurocentric world has its roots. They settled there, and then these tribes migrated north and west in Africa. Now they are the Anglo-Saxons. They have morphed into Anglo-Saxons, and they are the ruling tribes. So, for example, when I went to the British Museum in London. This fact was, there's so many instances, but I guess this is the best one that I can think of to make you understand that these are the same people. When you go to the British Museum in London, they have, as part of one of their exhibits, displays, permanent collection, The little replica of the colonial, the colony that the Romans made out of England, right, out of London. When the Romans conquered, moved north and west, they were forced out of Rome, right? Because I think the best historical reason for it is that the lead paint started, killing them. So they had to leave, and they migrated north and west. They ended up in places like England, and they colonized. And they have little replicas of the colonies that these Romans made. So then they have morphed over time, evolution. They have morphed into what we call today the Anglo-Saxons, the ruling class, and there are 8 ruling class Anglo-Saxon tribes. And I had a great book, Ancient and Modern Britons. It is out of print. I lent it to my uncle, and one of my cousins took it, and I never saw it again. It documents the African ancestry of the Brits, the ruling class Brits. It was a brilliant book. I got it years ago. It was one of my treasures that I lent to my uncle, and one of my cousins took it and he took it and never returned. But I don't, so moving right along. So that is really the powers that be, the ruling class. And as I have said ad nauseum on my shows, how do they own or control the world? They own it by owning the controlling shares of stock in these vast multinational corporations, in the corporate wealth. But I want to say that there is a moral order to the universe. I'm going to repeat that. There is a moral order to the universe. I am not religious at all. As a fact, after what happened to my mother at the end of her life, I have been so turned off to religion, right? But I am a moral, ethical person, and I believe, fundamentally, I have all my life believed that there is a moral order to the universe. So we see now, again, that the neocon paradigm is more responsible for the fall of the American empire and by extension the fall of Anglo-Saxon Western capitalism than anything else. Not to mention, it is leading to, de facto, the rise of a new world order, a Polish-led Yugoslav, neo-Nazi, neo-fascist new world order. So I'm not surprised that this is not a secret anymore, folks. This is not a secret anymore. As a matter of fact, when Donald Rumsfeld was President Bush Jr.'s Secretary of Defense, he created a firestorm when, as the Secretary of Defense, he gave a speech and he said that places like Germany and France were old Europe and unimportant. What is important, he said, was New Europe, the countries that were at the time being added to NATO and the Western Alliance, which are the Yugoslav countries like Poland, Czechoslovakia. Those countries are what Donald Rumsfeld suggested are important. We are living through the fall of the American empire and by extension the fall of Anglo-Saxon Western capitalism. In other words, we are living through the fall of Western civilization and the rise of a new world order, a neo-Nazi, neo-fascist, Polish-led Yugoslav new world order. I'm not saying this because Donald Rumsfeld said it. I'm not saying it because Brent Scowcroft, who was probably Bush Sr.'s national security advisor, said it. I'm saying it because the evidence is overwhelming and irrefutable. And the main driving force for the destruction of Anglo-Saxon Western capitalism, the old world order, is and has been and continues to be the neocon paradigm. It has outsourced trillions, Conservatively, $7 trillion of the United States Treasury has been outsourced, taken out of the United States economy to destroy our friends and allies around the world, to wreak havoc on the rest of the world. And in so doing, it has meant that it is leading to the fall of the American economy. $7 trillion. Do you understand how much money $7 trillion is? The impact that is having on the American economy, outsourcing, taking it out of the country, outsourcing it. That means taking it out, $7 trillion out of the American economy, right? And $7 trillion, I might add, and counting, because they refuse to shut down the neocon paradigm. The people responsible for the governance of America refuse to shut down the neocon paradigm, and it would be a very easy thing for them to do. The Congress of the United States, the House and Senate, control the money that the government spends or how the government allocates its money. You don't have to take my word for it. Read the Constitution of the United States of America. True, the president proposes the budget, but the final budget is approved by the Congress, but more importantly, the funding for the president's priorities and the Congress's priorities, the money comes from the Congress of the United States of America. Now, we have had the expansion of the neocon paradigm, the neocon wars, since 2001. Democrats have been in control of Congress, so have Republicans. So it's disingenuous to suggest, for example, that the problem now is that the Republicans control the Congress, the House and the Senate, and the presidency, Donald Trump. Because when the Democrats have controlled the presidency and or one of the houses of Congress, the Senate or the House of Representatives, these policies have been funded. And if you look at the voting on the budgets, it is clear that the Democrats are as culpable as the Republicans. So now we see, for example, the Democrats, now that they no longer control the House and Senate or the presidency, are ad nauseum complaining about the fact that the Republicans are defunding everything they can that helps the people and deregulating and tax cuts for the corporate interests and the wealthy. But the Republicans, on the other hand, argue that the reason that they are defunding all of these programs is because there is no money, because technically America is bankrupt. It is. If you look at the debt, the trillions in debt that this country has accumulated, largely because of its commitment to the neocon paradigm since 2001 forward, the debt that this country has accumulated, the Republicans argue they are being fiscally responsible by their budget cuts, which have a disproportionate impact on ordinary folk, working people, the middle class and the working class and the poor. It's not that they're just doing this to get a pat on the head from the corporate interests. They say they're doing it because America has no money and they're being fiscally responsible. In my opinion, but the bottom line is they're forced to do it because $7 trillion, from the Republicans' perspective, they're forced to do it because $7 trillion has been outsourced from the United States government to support the neocon paradigm, which means to support the destruction of America's friends and allies around the world and to destroy lucrative markets for Anglo-Saxon Western capitalism. Not that the Democrats were much better. They were cutting too. Obama was cutting, Clinton cut, and not to mention the deregulation of the American economy, the corporate sphere, really has its roots in the Clinton administration when he was president, trying to outdo the Republicans. He did it with the deregulation. He did it with his policy for criminalization of young people, offenders, etc., etc. So the Democrats, to me, there is such little that to me, the difference between the Republicans and the Democrats is marginal. Very little, as from my perspective, I see very little different, and it's to me hypocritical when the Democrats get on a bandwagon and complain about the Republicans when they know that the solution, they're right insofar as the solution is not to cut programs for the masses, for working people, the middle class and poor people, not just protect the rich. The solution is to defund the neocon paradigm, and that is something that I don't see any Democrats rushing to do or calling for, and certainly no, I don't see any Republicans either. But if they wanted to start bringing back those funds back to America, the $7 trillion that has been outsourced, then the Congress, because under the Constitution of the United States of America, it is the Congress of the United States that controls how the federal money is spent. If the Democrats were sincere, in my opinion, then they would be defunding the neocon paradigm and repatriating, that's an economic term, in the economic sense, bringing that money back to America. If they were sincere, if it was keeping it real, if they were real. But they are as culpable as the Republicans, because neither the Republicans nor the Democrats are making any attempt to bring the money back to shut down the neocon paradigm, which to me means they are equally guilty, in my opinion, of treason, given the neocon paradigm and its funding has done more to destroy Anglo-Saxon Western capitalism and has done more to lead to the fall of the American empire than anything else. Now, you say, why don't they do it? It's obvious. They won't do it because the Polish lobby has it rigged, has the people responsible for the governance of America in Washington on treadmills. They are on the neocon gravy train. There are roughly 185,000. I'm going to repeat that. There are approximately 185,000 neocon contractors who get these contracts awarded by these politicians, right? And they essentially are kickbacks they support these politicians. That is to say, they contribute to their campaigns. So it's a neocon gravy train. That's what it is. It has been rigged for the political intellectual elites to support the neocon paradigm in order to be on the neocon gravy train, if not to get outright contracts, to get campaign contributions, etc., from neocon contractors. And who are these people? These are little people. They're not the big capitalist corporate interests. No. It's not the military industrial, not the big defense company. No, these are little people who set up consultancies, etc., etc. And there are it's been calculated, there are about 185,000 of these little people, retired government officials, retired CIA, retired academics, etc., etc., who are on the neocon gravy train. So it's rigged. It's a rigged game. The Congress won't defund because they could defund it, stop allocating money to these neocon contractors and shut down the neocon wars. Because let's be honest, the neocon armies, etc., military is a mercenary army, military. They're mercenaries. They're doing it because they're being paid to do it. If they shut down the money, then they would, if they defunded, Congress defunded it, then they, then they, excuse me, if they defunded it, then there would be no neocon wars. In fact, according to, it's been in the mainstream media that ISIL was a CIA operation. CIA created, funded, deployed, supplied by the CIA and continues to be recruited by the CIA. Now, I don't want to take shots at the CIA because the CIA does what the leadership of this country demands that they do, right? Even when they protest. As quiet as it kept, the CIA was against the neocon paradigm. They were against toppling Saddam Hussein because they said it would lead to chaos in the region. They were right. They said that they should not topple Gaddafi because it would lead to chaos and a migrant crisis for Europe that would be unprecedented. And hasn't it? Yes, the CIA was right. But the CIA has to go along with it because they serve the political intellectual elites. But they opposed Libya, toppling Gaddafi. He was an ally of Anglo-Saxon Western capitalism. He kept the migrant crisis out of Europe. He kept that region of the world stable. Monster that he was. They were against toppling Saddam Hussein because they said it would lead to chaos in that region. And hasn't it led to? Yes. I'm not here to toot the horn of the CIA, but I gotta keep it real. I gotta keep it real. So you say, well, why did the politicians go along with it? Because they want chaos. Because through that chaos, they get the neocon wars, and the 185,000 relatively little people can give them kickbacks, bribes, campaign contributions, etc., etc., because they profit from the chaos at the expense of the American people and at the expense, I might add, of the corporate interest. You say, oh, yes. As I have said in the past, capitalism demands market expansion and growth. When an economy declines, when we have a recession, or if it's really bad, a depression, capitalism loses. Profits go down the toilet. So capitalism is anti-war because wars destroy markets. Consumer industrial economies are always the best. So therefore, by abandoning the military industrial complex for the neocon paradigm, in my opinion, that is treason on two counts. Number one, it is destroying the defense capability of Anglo-Saxon Western capitalism, the military-industrial complex. And number two, it's destroying Western consumers. Absolutely. Under the military-industrial complex paradigm, for example, in Jack Murtha's district, 2 kids would graduate from high school, get married, buy a house in the 2-car garage house in the suburbs, have a couple of kids, buy a boat, Disney World vacations, live the American dream. And if the kids graduated from high school and they wanted to go to Harvard or Yale, the parents could afford to send them to Harvard or Yale. Now, or if they didn't, they'd work in the defense factory, the military-industrial complex or related factories and live the American dream with a high school diploma. Now, and this was replicated in all 50 of the 50 states because for national security reasons, military-industrial complex products were manufactured in America for national security reasons by American firms guaranteeing jobs and profits for Americans. And this was replicated in all 50 of the 50 states because the defense budget military-industrial complex budget was allocated over all 50 of the 50 states. Today in Jack Murtha's district, because the Congress, the president have shifted the money from the neocon, from the military-industrial complex to the neocon paradigm, which has outsourced conservatively $7 trillion to destroy our friends and allies around the world. Today in Jack Murtha's district, those same two kids I talked about, instead of living the American dream, are living the American nightmare. They're living in a shelter. If they want help from the American government, from the government, they have to become addicts, dysfunctional addicts. Their children are being likely to be destroyed in living in the shelter system too, as opposed to the American dream, graduating from high school, getting a house in the suburb, getting married, a house in the suburb, 2-car garage, Disney World vacation, boat. The American dream. Now it's the American nightmare. Living in a shelter. If they want help, the government demands that they become dysfunctional addicts. This is directly related to the shift from the military-industrial complex paradigm to the neocon paradigm. Clearly and unequivocally, it is therefore an assault. It is an assault on many levels on Anglo-Saxon Western capitalism. And the military-industrial complex, the best way it worked was without war. The United States building these new planes, tanks, jeeps, whatever, uniforms, whatever, houses for soldiers, whatever, guns, whatever, not to fight a war, no, hell no. There's a moral order to the universe, but to replace the old antiquated equipment with the new state-of-the-art. Anyone who's prepared to die for their country should have the best equipment, not the neocon junk that they have now. So without a war, that was the genius of Ronald Reagan. Without a war, his economy recovered without a war because he had massive spending on the military-industrial complex without a war, creating great blue-collar, white-collar jobs, great profits for the shareholders in the military-industrial complex firms. Now, it's going to the neocon paradigm, which is, in my opinion, treason. Because it's destroying the Western consumer. It is destroying the Western consumer. It is a direct hit, therefore, on Anglo-Saxon Western capitalism. By turning these people into dysfunctional addicts living in shelters, as opposed to being upwardly mobile consumers for Western capitalism, it is destroying Western, Anglo-Saxon Western capitalism. So we hear in the news all these terrible stories about how retailers are losing business. They say it's because the shift from the bricks and mortar stores to the online stores, but many of these retailers have online stores too. So that's not really, something else is happening. I'll tell you what's happening. People who would be going to Macy's, JCPenney's, Kmart, Saks, Bloomingdale's, whatever, are now, who under the old system, military-industrial complex system, now they can't do that. They can't afford to do that. They're living in shelters. They're getting secondhand clothes. Before, under the military-industrial complex system, they had money so they could buy at all these retailing stores. That's what's killing retailing, by destroying the American consumer. And there go the Democrats complaining that the Republicans are just cutting everything except for the rich. But what they fail to say is, and what the Republicans say is, they're cutting everything because there's no money. What they both fail to say is there is no money because they refuse to shut down the neocon paradigm. So when I live in New York, right? In the Bronx, New York, that's where I live now. So when I see in the news that they're cutting HHC, Health and Hospitals Corporation, that's the public hospital system in New York. And Obama cut it. They didn't complain. The Democrats didn't. Now they're whining because Trump is cutting, the Republicans are cutting it too. So that means that, again, let me put it this way. 2/3 of the capitalist economy is based on consumer spending. Consumer spending. So by turning people who were upwardly mobile consumers under the military-industrial complex, under the neocon paradigm, turning them into dysfunctional and not consumers at all, it's a direct assault on Anglo-Saxon Western capitalism, because any economist will tell you that 2/3 of economic growth is rooted in consumer spending. There is a moral order to the universe. The assault on the American middle class, the American working class, and on poor people is an assault on Anglo-Saxon Western capitalism itself, because 2/3 of economic growth, 2/3 of economic spending is related to consumer spending. So by destroying Americans, making them marginal and dysfunctional, is a direct hit on capitalism itself. Again, the solution is for the Congress of the United States, both the Republicans and the Democrats, to defund the neocon paradigm and to begin to repatriate that $7 trillion that's been outsourced back to the old system that was working. Back to the military-industrial complex system without a war. A consumer-industrial economy is always better, but nothing proved better in generating wealth and jobs and income for Americans than the military-industrial complex paradigm. In fact, when they decided to abandon it for the neocon paradigm, in their paper, Rebuilding America's Defenses, the paper by the Project for the New American Century, they state clearly and unequivocally that the system was working. And they needed a, quote, new Pearl Harbor to hoodwink the masses into abandoning something that was working so well. 2 kids from graduate high school, get married, buy a house and 2-car garage house in a suburb, parochial private school for the kids, a boat, Disney World vacations, yada, yada, yada. It was working. They had to hoodwink the American people into abandoning this. And how did they do it? And in the document itself, they said in the document it says it's available online, through a new Pearl Harbor, and 9/11 is considered their new Pearl Harbor. Is considered their new Pearl Harbor. So we see this assault, going back to this assault on the masses of people, on working people, on middle class, working class, and poor people. It's like a full court press. You have poverty, you have disease, you have cutbacks, federal cutbacks, government cutbacks and programs. It is really a full court press, the assault on working people, on the masses. And again, it is short-sighted because 2/3 of the economic growth is rooted in consumer spending. There's a moral order to the universe. So it is very, very much short-sighted. Penny wise and pound foolish. Because in so doing, it's like they're cannibalizing the economy by these assaults on the masses of people, on Americans. Now, if I were really into conspiracy theories and whatnot, I would say, well, with the advent of robotics, they don't need they probably, and there have been things of, along these lines that have come out. There is a move to robotics, and the capitalists think that they can destroy or decimate populations because they're going to have robots doing everything. They won't need people, which is anyone who understands science and technology knows that that is really absurd. It's absurd. I guess metaphorically, the best way for me to communicate that to you, drawing from my understanding of science and technology, having gone to, at the time, the top high school in the world for math and science, the Bronx High School of Science. At the time, it was ranked number one in the world for math and science. I have a lifelong interest in science. In fact, when I graduated from primary school, at graduation, I received the award for distinction in science. So I have a lifelong interest in science and technology. So the idea that they think that robots are going to be loyal to them is absurd. Put it this way. Robots are cold, calculating, and dispassionate. Metaphorically, they think and feel with their heads. They are cold, calculating, and dispassionate. Unlike humans, we are best when metaphorically we think with our heads, but when we feel with our hearts. But robots are heartless. They're machines. So it's absurd for anyone to think that if they get rid of humans, robots, and they populate, then they use robots to do all the drudgery, the dirty work, that the robots are going to be loyal to humans. How can a machine that's smarter than humans, or at least as smart as, if not smarter than humans, be loyal to humans? That would be irrational. That would be irrational. Again, robots are purely rational. They're heartless. They are pure, cold, and calculating machines. They are not irrational. They will not be irrational, and therefore they will not be loyal to humans. Not to mention the advent of robotics means, if anything, we need more humans than ever before. Somebody has to be watching all these intelligent machines. So we need more people now on Earth than at any other time with the advent of these intelligent machines. Somebody has to be watching these machines. But if it looks like there are some conspiracy theories that suggest that we are moving to a world where the only thing that will be left is like a Poland and some robots. Poland and some robots. That's what it looks like. Because the assault on the American consumer is also going on in Europe, but an assault on the European consumer too. And we see the genocide in the oil-producing region, the genocide in Africa, the genocide through poverty, disease, civil strife, etc. It's a global phenomenon that is decimating populations, and these idiots want to increase the neocon wars. They want the whole continent ablaze with neocon wars. And so if you're a conspiracy theorist, you say, aha, you see, they want to get rid of humans. They really are moving towards robotics. So if I were an automobile worker, or I worked at General Electric, or whatever, if I were a factory worker in America, I would say, thank God for Kim Jong-un, the North Korean dictator, because he keeps the neocon wars out of the Pacific Rim. Because if General Motors, Ford, Chrysler, Gucci, Ferragamo, etc., Land Rover, Camry, were not Hyundai, Microsoft, Dell, etc., were not selling to the Pacific Rim, if they allow Kim Jong-un, the North Korean dictator, to fall, and they spread the neocon wars to the Pacific Rim, Who the hell are the American workers going to be making products for? War destroys markets. The thing to do is not to spread the neocon wars, not all the saber rattling to get rid of Kim Jong-un, but the thing to do is to shut the neocon paradigm down and to redirect resources back to America via the military-industrial complex without a war. Without a war. So we have a resurgence of the American consumer, healthy, wealthy consumer, not the dysfunction living in shelters, etc., etc., on public assistance. No, people, if people do what they perceive to be in their interest to do. If working would means that you can live a middle class life, people will work. But the assault on the Western consumer is an assault on Anglo-Saxon Western capitalism. So we see all these cuts, and living in New York, and I live in the Bronx. We see HHC, the public hospitals, cut. Why are these federal cuts? And Obama was cutting them too. Cutting HHC, and we see Amtrak, the train derailment. We see the city. It's like a third world country. America's becoming, it's the fall of the American empire. We see it. We see HHC budget cuts. So what does that mean? If public hospitals are no longer getting the federal money that they had been getting, what does that mean? That's like giving them a green light to genocide. This is giving a green light to genocide. I'm too old to sugarcoat it. Because they're going to have to turn people away or worse, because they don't have the money to treat them. So it's going to shrink. Public health is going to shrink, which means a lot of people who need health care are not going to be served. This is so the Republicans say they do it because to be fiscally responsible. The Democrats say they're doing it because they want to serve the rich. They're doing it because $7 trillion of the budget was outsourced to fight these neocon wars. Money that should be in America, activating the multiplier via the military-industrial complex without a war, the way it used to be. Things really changed in the 1990s. And in the 1990s, not only were the seeds for the neocon wars, the neocon paradigms planted, but also the seeds for this whole deregulation of the corporate sector, which always is a prescription for disaster. Always is. So I really didn't see the impact of it in the 90s. In the 90s, things were rolling along, but post the 90s, we see the impacts of what deregulation has meant and what the neocon paradigm has meant. And, for example, there is a moral order to the universe. Not only for the military, keeping our military state-of-the-art, but I have been saying now for decades, there is a new line of business for the military-industrial complex, which is environmental protection and cleanup. The two industries, military-industrial complex and environmental protection, are related. So by cleaning up the air, the water, the land, that would be a big shot in the arm of the military-industrial complex and a big shot in the arm of the American economy, just like repatriating or bringing that money back from the neocon paradigm to America would be a big shot in the arm. But it's not going to happen until we get new people because of the people who currently are responsible for these decisions are committed to the neocon paradigm. They're like, the system has been rigged. They're like in the third world, where third world leaders do things to destroy their countries, right, for foreign interests. Well, we're the same thing. We're doing it for Poland, for the Polish lobby. But it is misguided to think that they can decimate human populations because robotics are going to come online, because it's extremely naive for anyone to think a cold calculating machine like a robot would be loyal to humans. They would be contemptuous of humans. True, this is true, a caveat. As we search for the so-called fountain of youth or immortality, increasingly humans are going to become robots. Increasingly we are. When organs and parts of our bodies fail, they're going to be replaced by artificial heart, lung, whatever. So increasingly we're going to morph into robots. We're going to morph into robots, into machines. As we search for the fountain of youth, as we replace organs and body parts that fail, increasingly we're going to become robots. But that being said, you know what I mean when I say it's pretty stupid to think, for humans to think that cold, calculating, dispassionate robots are going to be loyal to humans. You can't program loyalty, that I'm aware of. So that is very, very much misguided. Because clearly we see it as genocide. We see genocide. When it cuts to HHC, I see it as genocide. Put it this way, it will be genocidal in its impact because public health care is not going to be able to treat a lot of people that it used to treat. So it's genocidal in its impact. I'm too old to sugarcoat anything. Well, I think I'm going to stop now. You've been listening to the Beverly Copeland Report. I'm Beverly Copeland. Today is Sunday, May the 14th, 2017. I'm Beverly Copeland.